Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In the media, it is now widely reported that a woman in Saudi Arabia has been arrested in relation to a video that was widely shared online, which showed her strolling along on an empty street in Saudi Arabia wearing a skirt and a crop top in the conservative Muslim kingdom, as the media narrates. It's all over the media. Now, why is this so interesting for secularists and atheists and agnostics and Christians who live in the Western Hemisphere? Why is this so important to them? Well, it's important to them because they believe that they want to liberate the Muslim world, and they want to liberate those who want their own freedoms and human rights. Now, this is incredibly hypocritical, if you ask me, because it's the same Western Hemisphere that tells us that Muslims who come and live in the Western world, who want to leave their Middle Eastern cultures, they should come and adapt to our way of life and follow our laws and our democratic secular belief systems. And if you want to impose your creeping Shariah law onto the West, then you should be deported, you're backwards, you haven't progressed, you should live in the cave. If you want to live by those laws, you should go back to the Middle East. But then when Muslims want to practice these belief systems in the Middle East, as they say, go back to the Middle East, right? But then in the Middle East, the same secularists and the Westerners want to impose their rules and regulations, their moral values upon another foreign sovereign country, that being Saudi Arabia. So this is extraordinary double standards by the secularists and the Westerners. It's just unbelievable. And what is more unbelievable, how they throw their outrage and they say Saudi Arabia has to change its laws. You know, Saudi Arabia is part of the United Nations Council. It's part of the Human Rights Watch. I mean, how could they be part of that council and not allow women to dress the way they want? Why shouldn't they allow the Western moral value to be allowed in that country, in that state? Yet these same secularists then have a problem with the burqa or the niqab or the way the Muslim dresses or the way the Muslim wants to implement his Sharia law in the West. They have a problem with that. What happened to the human rights then? So when it's the West going into the Muslim world, human rights matters. When the Muslims in those Muslim countries want human rights, that human rights matters. But Muslims living in the West and demand their religious human rights, oh no, that's now different now. Oh, now you got to go and live in the Middle East. Oh, really? So you demand us to live in the Middle East, but then when we want to live in the Middle East, or if we go to the Middle East, or if you tell us to go to the Middle East, then you want to come there and change those laws as well. That's how you want it. So we're not safe to practice Sharia law in the West. No, we're not also safe to practice it in the Muslim world. No, you basically want to take it away from us in the Western world, and you want to take it away from us in the Middle East. You know, these guys want to talk about creeping Sharia law trying to take over the world, Sharia law trying to impose its rules and regulations to the rest of the world. But where are all these Ayaan Ali Hirsis, Rita Panahirs, Pamela Gallers? Where is Pauline Hanson of the One Nation? Where is Majid Nawaz? And where is Sheikh Tawhidi and all of these reformists now condemning the Westerners for trying to impose their moral standards on the Muslim world? Where are they? They're all in hiding. Not one of them are standing up and speaking out. But what we do have in the comment section, some people are actually standing up and saying that this is hypocritical and there's double standards here. Have a look at what one comment says. This is Eve, Evali. She says, it's simple. You visit that country, you must respect the laws, even though you don't agree with it. If you only want to do what you do at home, stay home, don't go abroad and bring shame on yourself. So basically, here's a non-Muslim, Eve, who is actually admitting to say you should respect those laws of the lands. If you go there, you should respect those laws and you should fulfill those laws. You shouldn't go to Saudi Arabia and break those laws. So again, and we Westerners wouldn't like that to be done here, right? So the Westerner also argues that if a Muslim comes to this country, he should live by the law of the land. You shouldn't break those laws. And if you don't live by that, then you should just pack up your bags and leave. I mean, this is what they say. This is what the Westerners say. You should pack up your bags and you should leave if you don't like our democratic systems. I mean, this is the sentiments that they say to Muslims every single day. Don't come here and change our laws. Take your laws back somewhere else. If you want to live by our laws, you should respect it. Yet the same Islamophobes then have a problem and don't apply that same standard on themselves. When they go and visit Saudi Arabia and some of those other Gulf countries, they then want to impose their values, moral standards on those countries. And let me just address this point here. Jody says, look at all the Muslims saying people should obey the laws of the land, and yet they squall about US laws and break our laws all the time. Now, there's a double standard and a fallacy in that comment. And some even went to the extent to call it hypocritical. Let's see what one other comment said. The comment was basically in the same lines of Jody. I can't exactly find it, but it says, quote unquote, that it is hypocritical, basically, that Muslims are saying that, you know, non-Muslims should respect the laws of a Muslim country and abide by them, while Muslims here want to impose their own cultural standards. But look at the fallacy here. Let's see who the real hypocrite is. You see, Saudi Arabia, unlike the Western Hemisphere, they don't go out and say we believe in secular democracy and liberalism and the human rights according to Western standards. Freedom for all, religious rights for all, and so forth. In Saudi Arabia, it's different in that kingdom. See, had they have said, yes, we believe in religious rights, we believe in freedom rights, we believe in secular liberalistic rights, sure. And then if they go out and put certain restrictions on women's clothing, of course I would call them a hypocrite. Of course I will say that. But, there's a big but. You, on the other hand, you are a secularist and you believe in total human rights, as you claim. Now, I can actually show you the hypocrisy even in that, but let's just give you that argument that, yes, you do promote secularism and liberalism and human rights. Yet, on the other hand, you also claim that you believe in religious rights, which is another thing that you apparently believe in. So, when a Muslim comes here and wants to wear the hijab and the niqab and wants to build a mosque, you're the one that wants to put restrictions on that and ban it. So who is the bigger hypocrite? Is it Saudi Arabia or is it the Western secular democratic liberalistic trumpet that claims to the rest of the world that you are the bearers of human rights, yet you put restrictions on religious people? You want to put out all these campaigns, ban the mosque in Bendigo, stop the mosque. You want to, ban the burqa, ban the hijab. You want to promote all of these things against Muslims, but then you say, oh, look, Saudi Arabia is doing it. Why can't we? Well, you can't. I mean, if you do, then you're just like Saudi Arabia. So if you want to be like Saudi Arabia, then don't sit there and call yourself a humanistic, liberalistic, freedom of rights, freedom of all. So you got to put things in perspective. Muslims aren't hypocrites for saying that the Westerners should tolerate their religious beliefs, because that's what you say. You tell Muslims that you stick up for their religious rights and their freedom of rights under your religious undiscriminative laws, apparently. So then you need to give them that freedom. You can't start trying and attacking Saudi Arabia and saying they're hypocrites while they send Muslims here and they can practice anything that they like, yet they don't allow us Westerners to practice our faith and our moral standards over there. You can't do that. You basically want to be different from Saudi Arabia. So upon that moral compass, then you can't just turn around and blame Saudi Arabia and Muslims for being hypocritical now, can you? You know, it's interesting because we wanted to play the same card as the vigilante groups here in Australia. You know, they always say to Muslims, bugger off. You know, if you don't like our laws and customs and things like that, you should just leave. If you want to impose Shariah law or your religious customs and cultures in this country, then you should just pack up your bags and leave. Actually, they don't have the right to say that, because they themselves believe in integration, and they believe, well, they have to believe in that because that's what their constitution says. But of course, if those right-wing groups do not want to believe that, then they are just as bad as those Muslims, because those vigilante right-wing groups do not believe in their own legislative laws, that believes in inclusion, that believes in diversity, that believes in religious rights. So when those right-wing groups say bugger off, they're actually breaking their own laws. In fact, the only one that has got the right to say bugger off, if you don't like our laws, are the Saudis. I mean, because they made it plain and clearly to you that these are our laws. We don't tolerate any other religion under that Mecca, Medina peninsula. So if you don't like it, then just leave. That's it. They've basically made their statement. So they're the only ones who have got the opportunity and the permissibility, in my view, that they can tell other people to just bugger off if you don't like it, which makes sense because that's exactly the requirement they have. And it's interesting because a person called Rebecca Mitchell came out and says, no, we won't bugger off. Their laws are gross violation of human rights. So notice how they're trying to impose now their secular mentality on those countries. So they don't want to bugger off now. They don't want to leave those Muslims alone to practice what they believe is their moral compass. No, now we're having creeping secularism that wants to impose its ideology on the rest of the world, including the Middle East. So they won't bugger off. Can you imagine if a Muslim said, I'm not going to bugger off, I'm going to force my Sharia law upon another country like Australia, and I'm not going to bugger off. So I would be called a radical. I'd be called an extremist. But you see Rebecca Mitchell here in the comments, she's saying, I'm not going to bugger off. I'm going to go out and stick up for those women under human rights. Yet these same people will not stick up for the human rights of Muslims who want to practice hijab and niqab in Australia. I mean, it's unbelievable, the double standards, isn't it? So Rebecca, please stop trying to impose Western-style Sharia law into Saudi Arabia. If you want Western laws, go live in the Western country. How does that sound? Bloody Westerners trying to bring creeping secular Sharia into our lands. We need to deport them out of Saudi. If you don't love it, then bugger off. In fact, you know what we should do in Saudi Arabia? Yeah, if this creeping Western-style Sharia starts expanding all over the streets of Saudi, where all of these women are starting to, dress half naked in their miniskirts, then the brothers in Saudi and the sisters who are for Sharia should start a vigilante group titled, listen to this, titled reclaim Saudi First Party and call for the deportation of those trying to change the Saudi way of life. You know, maybe they should hold all these banners up with the Saudi Arabian continent country and saying, F off, we're full, you know, something that the Australians do. You know, amazingly, another critic wrote that Saudi Arabia is on the UN Humanitarian Council, and they talk about, how Saudi Arabia could, ban a woman from wearing a skirt and so forth. Isn't that hypocritical? Yet at the same time, look at France. France is also under the United Nations Council, and don't they believe in freedom of rights? Yet they ban the burqa. So notice the double standards there. Saudi Arabia's human rights are different than the human rights of the Western world. Every country has their own moral standards regarding human rights. You can't impose your human rights on Saudi, and Saudi, of course, can't do it for your Western world. So you see the double standards. It's just they conflate the two together and make a fallacy on a false equivocation. And let me end with this point. It's funny how they say, Saudi Arabia, it's against women's human rights and we need to change them and blah, blah, blah. And Saudi Arabia isn't perfect. Yeah, they've got some laws that oppresses women where they can't drive and so forth. But let's how Jesus said, first, if you see the plank in your brother's eye, then first pull out the plank out of your own eye. It reminds me of that verse when we actually look at the West. Let's see the culture in the West. This is according to the Women Leading Book in Australia Reveals by Christine Nixton and Amanda Sinclair. Women compared to men have got 1 in 9 chances of becoming a CEO compared to men. That's only 3% of Australia CEO are women. So this is in the West. Only 3% can actually become a CEO in Australia. Only 3% of them are actually women. That's 1 out of 9 chances. Australia till this day has not had a democratically elected Prime Minister. Even Julia Gillard was elected by her own cabinet, her own office. Her own party wasn't democratically elected by the people. And these people want to talk. Apparently these are the evolved, the progressive, secular think tanks, the enlightenment to the world. And they couldn't even democratically elect their own Prime Minister, who is a female. Australia has an annual White Ribbon Day, which condemns thousands of cases of domestic and sexual violence towards women, which the numbers are growing and it's epidemic, and they even commemorate it each year trying to stop these violences and sexual abuses. Apparently, according to new statistics, and I'll put the hyperlink below this video so you can see it for yourself, Islamophobes, when they actually target Muslims, they don't go and target the men. Generally they do, but majority of the times it's 70% of them are actually women that they target compared to the men. So they tell us that it is Saudi men abusing women and Muslims abusing women, yet according to the statistics, it's actually Muslim women who are being abused by non-Muslim men. 70% of the targets are against women. That speaks volumes. So you have a cultural problem of abuse and human rights violations against women where they're still getting underpaid compared to men and so forth. And then first fix up those issues and problems, and then if you want to go out and try and save the women of Saudi Arabia, go for it. But clean up your own backyard.